Hi, my name is Sarah Martin. I'm a public historian with an interest in local history and the built environment. I'm standing just off of Westlake Avenue at the north end of the Queen Anne neighborhood. And just behind me is Lake Union. And up and down this shoreline is a neighborhood of floating homes. It was here in the early 1920s that a small colony of houseboats took root. At the time, this place was a bustling, gritty, smelly industrial scene. And most houseboats on Lake Union at that time, maybe a few hundred, were no more than floating shacks. So if you look closely, you can still see some of this history on the landscape, from the Northern Pacific Railroad tracks of the early 20th century to the Aurora Bridge soaring above us, built in 1932, to the urban waterway behind us that still serves as a marine highway connecting Lake Washington and Lake Union with Puget Sound. This is the Old Boathouse. It's a cooperatively owned and shared dock that is named after one of Seattle's most iconic floating buildings. And it's one of 10 floating homes moored here. So before we check it out, I'd like to offer a few quick pointers. Shared docks like this are private places, so please don't wander out without permission. Before we get too far, I'd like to do a quick vocabulary lesson. So homes on the water can take many forms. They can be house barges, live-aboard boats, and floating homes. And they have different definitions, but collectively and generically, we refer to them as houseboats. These are floating homes. And what we mean by that is they are houses that are built on a floating platform that are moored to a dock. They have no means of independent mobility, and they're connected to land only by their utilities. So that's floating homes. You might wonder about boathouses. Well, boathouses are not houses at all. They're typically where boats and water-related items are kept, and they can be multifunctional in purpose. Floating homes are usually clustered around a shared dock that extend well out into the waterway. And typically, a floating boardwalk accesses all the houses. You'll often see hand railings on one side and utility poles carrying cables and pendant lights hanging from above. And you'll notice everyday life spills out onto the decks and the docks surrounding the homes. You'll see clotheslines, storage bays, and the tools and toys of waterside living. Older houseboats from the early and mid-20th century are typically small wood frame structures. They were built to be functional, so you don't typically see much architectural and stylistic embellishment. You'll often see them with a low-pitched gable roof or a curved sprung roof. And their claddings are typically made of wood, such as lapped cedar siding, or shingles, or vertical board and batten. The key is they're functional and rustic. So cedar logs were considered the best for flotation. They tended to waterlog more slowly over time. And they were strapped together to form sort of an inverted triangle shape. And on top of the logs were a row of wood stringers, and on top of the stringers were the floor joists that formed the platform. When it comes to maintenance, it's the row of stringers that most frequently needs replacement, and the occasional addition of supplemental flotation is sometimes required. In the case of this house, 55-gallon plastic barrels have been added to the foundation to add stability and strength to the floating platform. The Wagner floating home was built in about 1910, and it got its start as a seasonal houseboat on Lake Washington, near Madison Park, and it was moved to this location in about 1938. It was home to Richard and Colleen Wagner for more than a half-century, and they are best known for their role in co-founding the Center for Wooden Boats, which got its start as a boat livery right here in 1968. This area here was the heart of the boat livery, and by the mid-1970s, it was full of traditional small wooden boats that people could come and rent for the day. The Wagners hosted monthly meetings of wooden boat enthusiasts, and the group incorporated in 1978 as the Center for Wooden Boats. The center operated its first 2 years right here before transitioning to its current location at the south end of Lake Union in 1983. The Wagners raised their 2 boys in this house, David and Michael. Here are the remnants of a small framed swimming pool for the Wagner boys that they used when they were small. It was once a submerged pen made of chicken wire with a wood floor for them to swim safely. From the shared dock, the house is entered through the kitchen, and the interior remains true to its original rustic character. It's really intact, and there have been no known changes to the plan itself. The first floor includes a kitchen, dining room, living room, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom, and the 2 small bedrooms upstairs are accessed by a ship's ladder. The kitchen has been conservatively updated with modern appliances and countertops, but it still has the old tongue-and-groove cabinetry and the built-in cupboards and drawers. From room to room, there are varying ceiling heights that provide interest and variety. The double doors and enormous window offer a pretty great view of the lake, making this a fun place to host a party and have friends over. And I'd like to share a bit of wisdom from Colleen Wagner herself. She said this: "Something you always have to be careful about on a houseboat is not to overload it on one side. Once, at a New Year's Eve party, I laid out all the food and punch on one side of the boat. Everyone congregated over there, and we started to list. It took several days for the houseboat to right itself completely." So the Wagners rebuilt this brick fireplace to replicate what had previously been here. The brick fireplace quite likely replaced an old wood stove from the earliest days. The home's compact space allows only for the ship's ladder to access the second floor, as opposed to a staircase. Here you can see the ship ladder version of a baby gate. This covered the staircase to prevent the Wagner boys from going up and down the staircase without permission. We've just climbed the ship's ladder to the second floor, and I love this part of the house. It truly feels like summer camp up here. The second floor is original to the structure, and you can see it in the earliest 1912 photographs. These 2 bedrooms are small and rustic, and when this place was a seasonal houseboat on Lake Washington, there were several built-in beds in these spaces. The Wagner floating home has just been designated a Seattle landmark, the city's first designated houseboat, which is really exciting. The home is important not only for its architecture and its reflection of Seattle's houseboat history, but also for its long association with Richard and Colleen Wagner. They were leaders in the lake community and were instrumental in igniting a revival of interest in traditional wooden boats in the greater Seattle area. Now, if you haven't yet visited the Center for Wooden Boats, which is also a newly designated Seattle landmark, I invite you to do so to experience the Wagner's legacy.
Oh, Sarah, in that book, it talks about that the house was built by a retired ferry boat captain.
I've seen a reference
It's what
to
they
that.
believe, yeah.
I was so frustrated by that.
Or it might be in that Venture magazine where it says that too.
It
might have been the Venture magazine.
I wish they would have at least said his name.
I know, and I still can't find that. I haven't found that piece of paper. That my mom had it written down on a piece of paper. It was just a little scrap paper.
I know, and I remember that clue, and it's like, I'm trying to figure out if we can find a way to, maybe someday.
See who all the retired ferry boat captains were from. There might be some record of that.